Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. Uh, our topics for I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Our topics for tonight are Scott Ritter on Iran retaliation, and also Pepe Escobar and Michael Hudson on Gaza genocide origins. Right off the bat, something has changed. Specifically, I'm going to postpone the discussion of the Gaza genocide origins to tomorrow night. And we'll also discuss that particular Pepe Escobar piece tomorrow. Instead, hi Kay, how are you? Okay, so instead of that, I'll be covering a new article from Pepe Escobar, which just appeared at thecradle.co. And I'll give you the link to that in just a moment since it's not in the description. You should have access to that as well. So I will put it in the chat, okay, right now. Well, good, Kay. Glad you're okay, and I'm so glad you're here. So we're going to cover that article by Pepe Escobar too. So what we've got then in the end is Scott Ritter's take on what happened on April 14th, 2024, from a piece at his Substack called The Missiles of April. Now, since April 14th, Scott has been going around everywhere talking about this piece, The Missiles of April. It's a great piece. I hope my commentary will be able to shed some new light on that piece. But even if my commentary does not do that, I believe that this new article by Pepe Escobar, how Iran's strategic patience switched to serious deterrence, will shed some light on what happened, on what happened on April 13th, Saturday night, and early Sunday morning on April 14th. So let's get right to Scott's piece. Well, I guess I should share this first. So give me a chance to do that. Let me share the live stream on Facebook. Okay. So I've now shared that one. And there's Brandy. Hi, Brandy. And we have a few others here too, probably watching on Twitter. So I'm going to go right to Scott's article. And I'll do an analysis and commentary on that article while reading it. Okay. This is from Scott's Substack, as I said earlier. Substack is Scott Ritter Extra. And the name of the piece is The Missiles of April. Okay, poetic enough. And there's one of the missiles. An Iranian missile is launched. Scores of these missiles were used to attack Israel. It's the caption. Iran's retaliatory attack on Israel will go down in history as one of the greatest victories of this century. Now, it'll be very interesting to see why Scott thinks that, since in the Western media, right after it happened, the original impressions were of it, well, there was little or no damage to Israel. So, really, the retaliation was a failure. Scott had and has an entirely different perspective on it. Pepe Escobar also has an entirely different perspective on it. So we'll be getting two entirely different perspectives tonight, as well as my own perspective. Scott says, I've been writing about Iran for more than 2 decades. In 2005, I made a trip to Iran to ascertain the, quote, ground truth, unquote, about that nation. A truth which I then incorporated into a book, Target Iran, laying out the U.S.-Israeli collaboration to craft a justification for a military attack on Iran designed to bring down its theocratic government. I followed this book up with another deal breaker in 2018, which brought this U.S.-Israeli effort up to date. Back in November 2006, so in other words, Scott has been thinking about and writing about the relationships of Iran to the U.S. and Israel for a very long time. Back in November 2006, in an address to Columbia University School of International Relations, I underscored that the United States would never abandon my, quote, good friend, unquote, Israel, till, of course, we did. What could precipitate such an action, I asked. I noted that Israel was a nation drunk of hubris and power, and unless the United States could find a way to remove the keys from the ignition of the bus Israel was navigating toward the abyss, we would not join Israel in its lemming-like suicidal journey. Well, so far, to say the least about this, it's been a close thing. Okay, sorry, folks. I had a bit of an interruption here. I had to help Bonnie with something. So, going on with the piece. The next year, in 2007, during an address to the American Jewish Committee, I pointed out that my umbrage of Israel, I think it's at Israel, which many in the audience took strong umbrage against. I pointed out my criticism of Israel, which many in the audience took strong umbrage against, came from a place of concern for Israel's future. I underscored, the reality that I had spent the better part of a decade trying to protect Israel from Iraqi missiles, both during my service in Desert Storm, where I played a role in the counter Scud missile campaign, and as a United Nations weapons inspector, where I worked with Israeli intelligence to make sure Iraq's Scud missiles were eliminated. Scott was on this afternoon, I'm sure, discussing this as well, in the lightning round, but I haven't gotten to enjoy that program yet. Quote, the last thing I want to see, unquote, I told the crowd, and the quote again, is a scenario where Iranian missiles were impacting on the soil of Israel. But unless Israel changes course, this is the inevitable outcome of a policy driven more by arrogance than common sense, unquote. On the night of 13th to 14th of April 2024, my concerns were played out live before an international audience. Iranian missiles rained down on Israel. There was nothing Israel could do to stop them. as had been the case a little more than 33 years prior when Iraqi Scud missiles overcame U.S. and Israeli Patriot missile defenses to strike Israel dozens of times over the course of a month and a half. The Iranian missiles integrated into a plan of attack which was designed to overwhelm Israeli missile defense systems, struck designated targets inside Israel with impunity. Despite having employed an extensive integrated anti-missile defense system comprised of the so-called, quote, Iron Dome, unquote, system, U.S.-made Patriot missile batteries and the Arrow and David Sling missile interceptors, along with U.S., British, and Israeli aircraft and U.S. and French shipborne anti-missile defenses, well over a dozen Iranian missiles struck heavily protected Israeli airfields and air defense installations. So I hadn't seen that estimate of over a dozen Iranian missiles actually striking the airfields, and air defense installations. So this evidently came out of intelligence that Scott had. The Iranian missile attack on Israel did not come out of the blue, so to speak, but rather was retaliation for an April 1st Israeli attack on the Iranian consulate building in Damascus, Syria, that killed several senior Iranian military commanders. Now, Israel has carried out attacks against Iranian personnel inside Syria in the past. The April 1st strike differed by not only killing very senior Iranian personnel, but by striking what was legally speaking sovereign Iranian territory, the Iranian consulate. From an Iranian perspective, the attack on the consulate was a red line, which, if not retaliated against, would erase any notion of deterrence, opening the door for even more brazen Israeli military action, up to and including direct attacks on Iran. Weighing against retaliation, however, were a complex web of interwoven policy objectives, which would probably be mooted by the kind of large-scale conflict between Israel and Iran that could be precipitated by any meaningful Iranian retaliatory strike on Israel. Scott puts that, I think, very, very well in terms of the dilemma, or at least the considerations that Iran faced when planning, the retaliation that it finally made. First and foremost, Iran has been engaged in a strategic policy premised on a pivot away from Europe and the United States. And, I have to add here that I haven't seen anybody else express that idea that there's an overall strategic policy which is premised on a pivot, going on with the article, toward Russia, China, and the Eurasian landmass. Once it's mentioned, that pivot, is obvious. It's obvious that's what has been going on. But not too many people that I've been reading about have expressed it in this way. I think it's important to understand that as a basic background for the retaliation. This shift has been driven by Iran's frustration over the U.S.-driven policy of economic sanctions and the inability and or unwillingness on the part of the collective West to find a path forward that would see these sanctions actually lifted. The failure of the Iranian nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, to produce the kind of economic opportunities that have been promised at its signing, has been a major driver behind this Iranian eastward pivot. So, I have to interject here also. Of course, the JCPOA was signed, or agreed to, under the Obama administration. As soon as Trump took over, he torpedoed, he withdrew the U.S. from the agreement. That is why, or at least one reason why, the kind of opportunities that have been promised at its signing has been a major driver behind this Iranian eastward pivot. So here we have to note, one of the costs of the election of Donald Trump in 2016 was the withdrawal of the United States from the JCPOA and, of course, the turning of Iran, to the east. Those two things are linked. They are one of the costs of the first presidency of Donald Trump, and we ought not to forget that. Of course, when Biden came into office, he had every opportunity to reconstruct it. But by then, there had been changes in Iran's foreign policy stance. And of course, he was trying to reconstruct it, as if the United States had done nothing wrong by withdrawing from it. So, of course, going forward with the agreement on that basis was unacceptable to Iran, in part because it had already started to pivot towards the east. Going on, in its stead, Iran has joined both the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO, or SCO, and the BRICS Forum, and has directed its diplomatic energies into seeing Iran thoroughly and productively integrated into both groups, which, of course, are led by Russia and China. Going on, Scott says, a general war with Israel would play havoc on these efforts. Secondly, but no less important in the overall geopolitical equation for Iran, is the ongoing conflict in Gaza. This is a game-changing event where Israel is facing strategic defeat at the hands of Hamas and its regional allies, including the Iranian-led Axis of Resistance. For the first time ever, the issue of Palestinian statehood has been taken up by a global audience. This cause is further facilitated by the fact that the Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu, formed from a political coalition which is vehemently opposed to any notion of Palestinian statehood, finds itself in danger of collapse as a direct result of the consequence accrued from the Hamas attack of October 7, 2023, and the subsequent failure of Israel to defeat Hamas, either militarily or politically. Israel is likewise hampered by the actions of Hezbollah, which has held Israel in check along its northern border with Lebanon, and non-state actors such as the pro-Iranian Iraqi militias and the Houthi of Yemen, which have attacked Israel directly, in the case of Houthi, indirectly, shutting down critical sea lines of communication, which have the result of strangling the Israeli economy. I remind everyone that the formal name of the Houthis, is Ansarallah. And while they are a non-state actor in a certain sense, they have control of most of Yemen, at this point, and have very powerful missile and rocket offense. But it is Israel that has done the most damage to itself, carrying out a genocidal policy of retribution against the civilian population of Gaza. The Israeli actions in Gaza are the living manifestation of the very hubris and power-driven policies I warned about back in 2006 and 2007, says Scott. Then I said that the U.S. would not be willing to be a passenger in a policy bus driven by Israel that would take us off the cliff of an unwinnable war with Iran. Through its criminal behavior toward the Palestinian civilians in Gaza, Israel has lost the support of much of the world, putting the United States in a position where it will see its already tarnished reputation irreparably damaged. At a time when the world is transitioning from a period of American dominated singularity to a BRICS-driven period, of multipolarity, and the U.S. needs to retain as much clout in the so-called, quote, global South, unquote, as possible. The U.S. has tried unsuccessfully to take the keys out of the ignition of Netanyahu's suicide bus ride. Faced with extreme reticence on the part of the Israeli government when it comes to altering its policy on Hamas and Gaza, the administration of President Joe Biden has begun to distance itself from the policies of Netanyahu and has put Israel on notice that there would be consequences for its refusal to alter its actions in Gaza to take the U.S. concerns into account. Any Iranian retaliation against Israel would need to navigate these extremely complicated policy waters, enabling Iran to impose a viable deterrence posture designed to prevent future Israeli attacks, while making sure that neither its policy objectives regarding a geopolitical pivot to the east, nor the elevation of the cause of Palestinian statehood on the global stage was sidetracked. The Iranian attack on Israel appears to have successfully maneuvered through these rocky policy shoals. Did so first and foremost by keeping the United States out of the fight. Yes, the United States participated in the defense of Israel, helping shoot down scores of Iranian drones and missiles. This engagement was to the benefit of Iran, since it only reinforced the fact that there was no combination of missile defense capability that could in the end prevent Iranian missiles from hitting their designated targets. Targets Iran struck 2 air bases in the Negev desert from which aircraft used in the April 1st attack on the Iranian consulate had been launched, along with several Israeli air defense sites, were directly related to the points Iran was trying to make in establishing the scope and scale of its deterrence policy. First, that the Iranian actions were justified under Article 51 of the UN Charter. Iran retaliated against those targets in Israel directly related to the Israeli attack on Iran. Second, that Israeli air defense sites were vulnerable to Iranian attack. The combined impact of these two factors is that all of Israel was vulnerable to being struck by Iran at any time. There was nothing Israel or its allies could do to stop such an attack. Now, I'm going to emphasize that conclusion strongly because it is most important. All of Israel is vulnerable to being struck by Iran at any time, and there is nothing Israel or its allies can do to stop such an attack. That might be an overdrawn conclusion. Of course, there might be something that Israel, and the United States could do it if they started, a nuclear war. But the assumption behind this conclusion is that that's not something the United States wants. It's not something that anybody wants. It's an unacceptable conclusion of this. So given that assumption, Israel is vulnerable to being struck by Iran at any time. And there is nothing Israel or its allies can do now to stop such an attack. The message resonated not only in the halls of power in Tel Aviv, going on with the article, but also in Washington, D.C. Excuse me. Where U.S. policymakers were confronted with the uncomfortable truth that if the U.S. were to act in concert with Israel to either participate in or facilitate and Israeli retaliation, then U.S. military facilities throughout the Middle East would be subjected to Iranian attacks that the U.S. would be powerless to stop. This is why the Iranians place so much emphasis on keeping the U.S. out of the conflict, and why the Biden administration was so anxious to make sure that both Iran and Israel understood that the U.S. would not participate in any Israeli retaliatory strike, against Iran. I should put in a comment here. Okay, if U.S. military facilities throughout the Middle East are subject, to Iranian attacks, at any time, and the U.S. is powerless, to stop them, and we have to ask the question: of what use are these military facilities? Of what use are they? If they can be destroyed, if they can be destroyed at any time, by Iran, Iran. We also have to ask, the question: if Russia was to take a hand, in any Middle Eastern war, then surely the combined capabilities of Iran, and Russia would be enough to neutralize all of the U.S. bases, in the Middle East. So again, I have to raise the question: why have those bases anymore? Why not simply lose the bases and bring everybody home? And of course, the answer we're going to get to that kind of question is, well, as long as we have these particular facilities here, then the existence of them is going to give pause, to other nations, in the Middle East, who might want to shift over to the BRICS bloc. Yes, it might give them some pause, but not as much pause as before this retaliatory attack. But going on with the article. This is why the Iranians place so much emphasis on keeping the U.S. out of the conflict, but why the Biden administration is so anxious to make sure that both Iran and Israel understood that the U.S. would not participate in any Israeli retaliatory strike, against Iran. The missiles of April, quote unquote, represent a sea change moment in Middle Eastern geopolitics, the establishment of Iranian deterrence that impacts both Israel and the United States, while emotions in Tel Aviv, especially among the more radical conservatives of the Israeli government, run high. And the threat of an Israeli retaliation against Iran cannot be completely discounted. The fact is, the underlying policy objective of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu over the course of the past 30 plus years, namely to drag the U.S. into a war with Iran, has been put into checkmate by Iran. Yes, and we have to add something else here. It's been put into checkmate by Iran, without Iran having any recourse to nuclear weapons, without Iran have developed any nuclear weapons. It was a major policy goal of Netanyahu over these past 30 plus years. He was focused on stopping Iran from getting a nuclear deterrent. And so Iran went around him and developed this deterrent based on strategic missiles. That's what happened. And that represents a huge failure of the Netanyahu policies. Fixed too much on stopping the nuclear deterrent, and now with the development of a strategic deterrent, if the Iranians want to, they can develop, a nuclear deterrent, as well. But I have to add here that the Ayatollahs, of Iran, consider the use of nuclear weapons, in war to be against Islam. And that's one major reason why they haven't moved forward, to develop, a nuclear deterrent. Going on. Moreover, Iran has been able to accomplish this without either disrupting its strategic pivot to the east or undermining the cause of Palestinian statehood. Quote, Operation True Promise, as Iran named its retaliatory attack on Israel, will go down in history as one of the most important military victories in the history of modern Iran, keeping in mind that war is but an extension of politics by other means. The fact, that Iran has established a credible deterrence posture without disrupting major policy goals and objectives is the very definition of victory. I couldn't agree more with Scott concerning that, but we also have to raise the question, and it's an enormously important question. And it's a question that Scott, is worried about. He was on Jimmy Dore's program, today. And one of the things he was saying that in contrast to what he said on April 14th in various appearances he made, that people could rest easy now that the strategic deterrence, of Iran had been well established, and Ben Gurion Airport was still open, and this was a sign that there was not going to be an immediate retaliatory attack, by Israel. So we were still not into the regional war, which would be so serious in its consequences, for all of us. But by tonight on Jimmy Dore's show, what Scott was saying was that in spite of the manifest nature of the deterrent, in spite of Israel being open to checkmate by Iran at any time, Netanyahu and the crazies, in Israel, were so committed to their course of action that he was afraid that Israel, and Netanyahu might still take the insane course of trying to retaliate, even though they know, of course, that the whole of Israel can be devastated, by the Iranian missiles. If we can project, Scott pointed out in this, how many missiles hit their target? Go back to the beginning and read that. Well, there are altogether 12. That hit their target. Well over a dozen, Iranian missiles evidently hit, their targets. That's with roughly 350 flying objects being sent over to Israel, by Iran. Now, Iran has enormous drone, cruise missile, and ballistic missile resources, at this point. I don't know how many thousands of assets it has in this particular area, but I point to one other thing. Hezbollah has a stock of 180,000 of these drones, cruise missiles, other kinds of rockets. They, of course, are much closer to Israel, and are extremely capable of basically flooding the zone of the Iron Dome system. If they have 180,000, to me, it's possible that the stock of Iran is 10 times as great, which means they may have a stock of 1.8 million of these objects that they can dispatch, towards Israel. There's no doubt, based on this one attack, that they can absolutely flood the zone, that all of Israel could be subject to a devastating attack. If it's 10 times as great as this attack, 3,500 objects would be flying towards Israel. If it was 100 times as great, 35,000 objects would be going towards Israel. Instead of having 12 of these hit their mark, 1,200 of these could be hitting their mark, and all of Israel could be devastated. And let's keep in mind that these missiles that finally get through are very precisely targeted. So what could Iran do with these missiles? One thing it could do is direct very many of them towards the Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. If Iran were to do that, the security of the Israeli settlers would be no more. It would be non-existent. And the missiles could be directed rather precisely at the physical Israeli settlements themselves. And they could all be hitting at once. Seems to me the day after such an attack, the surviving Israeli settlers would be heading to Ben Gurion Airport, if Iran was wise enough to spare the airport, so they could get out of the occupied territories in Palestine and go back to where they came. Of course, there would be many millions of Israelis departing Israel as well. The whole balance of power inside of Palestine could be changed by Iran if it chooses, such a course of action. Now, would it choose, such a course of action? Right now, it doesn't look like it will. It looks like it will bide its time and be cautious and be careful. But of course, the Israelis are evidently planning what shapes up as an insane retaliatory attack. If they go through with that, then that's just one of the things one can envision Iran doing in response. Also, of course, it could devastate both Tel Aviv and Haifa. It could really do whatever it wanted to plunge Israel into total chaos. It isn't clear that Israel can do the same thing to Iran. Iran has already threatened that if Israel starts any kind of attack, any kind of attack on Iran, and Israel will know exactly when that attack starts, because there's no hiding it from the satellite intelligence, which the Russians and Chinese are supplying to Iran. So they will know the minute that Israel launches an attack, and they have already said they will reply with missiles as soon as the attack is visible, long before the attack gets to Iran. The Iranian missiles will be flying. and whatever devastation they are intended to cause will be an accomplished fact. What kind of damage can 1,200 missiles with heavy explosives cause to Israel? Of course, the 1,200 hits are based on 35,000 missiles going up. Not just missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. The heavy majority being drones to confuse the Israeli defensive system. Now, I have to mention, I don't know what happened to the Iron Beam, but it was nowhere in evidence a few nights ago. I know Israel had tried it out somewhat. Evidently, it's not an integrated part of their defense system any longer. Or yet, the Iron Beam, is simply not there. Let's move now to Pepe's interpretation, which is a few more days in coming. And he points out, no Steve tonight. Yeah, I don't know where Steve is tonight. And he says, thousands did flee right after Iran's retaliation. So, going on to Pepe's piece. Now, let me share that. It appeared at thecradle.com. Pepe has a great title for it. It's another great piece by him, by the way. How Iran's strategic patience, quote unquote, switched to serious deterrence. And this was done on April 15th, 2024, just yesterday. I didn't see it yesterday. I checked out the Cradle yesterday. I didn't see it. So it must have appeared pretty late, in the day. There's a graphic with drones, and ballistic missiles being fired. I think that one right there in the foreground may be a cruise missile. And there's a map of Israel in the graphic. A little over 48 hours before Iran's aerial message to Israel across the skies of West Asia, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, Sergei Ryabkov, confirmed on the record what so far had been at best diplomatic talk. Ryabkov added, quote, we stay in constant touch, with Iran. New in-depth discussions on a whole range of issues related to the Middle East are also expected in the near future in BRICS. He then sketched the big picture. So I'm going to read these quotations now. I'm not sure if they appeared later on, in the article also. But in case they don't, I'm going to mention them now. Quote, the Russian side keeps in contact with Iranian partners on the situation in the Middle East after the Israeli strike on the Iranian consulate, in Syria. And then came the quote, from Ryabkov. Quote, we stay in constant touch with Iran. New in-depth discussions on the whole range of issues related to the Middle East are also expected in the near future in BRICS. He then sketched the big picture. Quote, connivance with Israeli actions in the Middle East, which are at the core of Washington's policy is in many ways becoming the root cause of new tragedies. Here, concisely, we had Russia's top but diplomatic coordinator with BRICS. Okay, and okay, it's true that Ryakov represents that. I made the type a little larger so you can more easily see it. Indirectly messaging that Russia has Iran's back. Iran, it should be noted, just became a full-fledged BRICS Plus member in January. Yes, January of this year. Iran's aerial message this weekend confirmed this in practice. Their missile guidance system used the Chinese Beidou satellite navigation system, as well as the Russian GLONASS system. This is Russia-China Intel leading from behind, and a graphics example of BRICS Plus on the move. Ryabkov's quote, "We stay in constant touch," plus the satellite navigation. Intel confirms the deeply interlocked cooperation between the Russia-China strategic partnership and their mutual strategic partner, Iran, based on vast experience in the Ukraine. Moscow knew that the biblical psychopathic genocidal entity, that's Israel if you haven't guessed, would keep escalating if Iran only continued to exercise, quote, strategic patience, unquote. The morphing of, quote, strategic patience, unquote, into a new strategic balance had to take some time, including high-level exchanges with the Russian side. After all, the risk remained that the Israeli attack against the Iranian consulate / ambassador's residence in Damascus could well prove to be the 2024 remix of the killing of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which, of course, is considered the trigger event, of World War I. And don't forget the Strait of Hormuz, says Pepe. Tehran did manage to upend the Western psychological operations aimed at pushing it into a strategic misstep. Iran started with a misdirecting masterstroke. U.S.-Israeli fear porn went off the charts, fueled by dodgy Western, quote, intel, unquote. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, made a quick sideways move, seizing an Israeli-owned container ship near the Strait of Hormuz. That was an eminently elegant type of maneuver, reminding the collective West of Tehran's hold on the Strait of Hormuz, a fact immeasurably more dangerous to the whole Western economic house of cards than any limited strike on their, quote, aircraft carrier, unquote, that's Israel, in West Asia that did happen anyway. And once again, with a degree of elegance, unlike that, quote, moral, unquote, army specialized in killing women, children, and the elderly and bombing hospitals, mosques, schools, universities, and humanitarian convoys. The Iranian attack targeted key Israeli military sites, such as the Nevatim and Ramon air bases, came the negative, and an intel center in the occupied Golan Heights. The three centers used by Tel Aviv in its strike on Iran's Damascus consulate. This was a highly choreographed show that multiple early warning signs gifted Tel Aviv with plenty of time to profit from U.S. intel and evacuate fighter jets and personnel, which was duly followed by a plethora of U.S. military radars coordinating a defense strategy. It was American firepower that smashed the bulk of what may have been a swarm of 185 Shahed 136 drones, using everything from ship-mounted air defense to fighter jets. The rest was shot down over Jordan by the Little King's military. The Arab street will never forget his treachery. And then by dozens of Israeli jets. Okay, the Little King, of course, is King Abdullah, of Jordan, who is a short man. And then by dozens of Israeli jets. I shouldn't make fun of a short man. I'm a short man myself. Israel's defenses were de facto saturated by the suicide drone, ballistic missile combo. Well, there was also the cruise missiles too. On the ballistic missile front, several pierced the dense maze of Israel's air defenses, with Israel officially claiming 9 successful hits. Interestingly enough, all of them hitting super relevant military targets. The whole show had the budget of a mega blockbuster for Israel, without even counting the price of US, UK, and Israeli jets. Just the multi-layered interception system set it back at least $1.35 billion, according to an Israeli official. How much would be set back? How much would it cost to try to defend against 35,000 of those objects? 1.35 billion, according to an Israeli official. Iranian military sources tallied the cost of their drone and missile salvos at only 35 million, 2.5% of Tel Aviv's expenditures made with full indigenous technology. That is indigenous to Iran, Iranian technology. There's a new West Asian chessboard. It took only a few hours for Iran to fully metastasize strategic patience into serious deterrence, what Scott calls strategic deterrence, sending an extremely powerful and multi-layered message to its adversaries and masterfully changing the game across the whole West Asian chessboard. Were the biblical psychopaths to engage in a real hot war against Iran, there's no chance in hell Tel Aviv can accept hundreds of Iranian missiles. The state-of-the-art ones excluded from the current show. The state-of-the-art ones are the hypersonic missiles, of course, without an early warning mechanism spread over several days. Without the Pentagon's umbrella of weaponry and funds, Israeli defense is unsustainable. It will be fascinating to see what lessons Moscow will glean from this profusion of lights in the West Asian sky, its sly eyes taking in the frantic Israeli political and military scene as the heat continues to rise on the slowly boiling and now screaming frog. As for the U.S., the West Asian War, one it hasn't scripted itself, does not suit its immediate interests. As an old school deep state stalwart confirmed by email, that could permanently end the area as an oil producing region and astronomically raise the oil price to levels that will crash the world financial structure. It is conceivable that the United States banking system could similarly collapse if the oil price rises to $900 a barrel, should Middle East oil be cut off or destroyed. It's no wonder that the Biden combo, days before the Iranian response, was frantically begging Beijing, Riyadh, and Ankara, among others, to hold Tehran back. The Iranians might even have agreed had the UN Security Council imposed a permanent ceasefire in Gaza to calm the regional storm. Washington was mute. The question now is whether it will remain mute. Mohammad Bagheri, chief of the General Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, went straight to the point. We have conveyed a message to America through the Swiss embassy that American bases will become a military target if they are used in future aggressive actions of the Zionist regime. We will consider this as aggression and will act accordingly. And the U.S. dilemma is confirmed by former Pentagon analyst whose name is Michael Maloof. Quote, we have got some 35 bases that surround Iran, and they therefore become vulnerable. They were meant to be a deterrence. Clearly, deterrence is no longer on the table here. Now they become the American Achilles heel, quote unquote, because of their vulnerabilities to attack. A very sage observation. All bets are off on how the U.S.-Israel combo will adapt to the new Iranian-crafted deterrence reality. What remains for the historic moment is the pregnant with meaning aerial show of Muslim Iran single-handedly unleashing hundreds of drones and missiles on Israel, a feat feted all across the lands of Islam, and especially by the battered Arab street, subjugated by decrepit monarchies that keep doing business with Israel over the dead bodies of the Palestinians, of Gaza. That's another brilliant piece, by Pepe. It's extremely accurate. It's very insightful. It pulls out also the cultural card, for us to consider. The triumph of the civilization of Islam over the civilization, of the West. Another beautifully written piece and a very, very good supplement to Scott's interpretation, of what the Iranian retaliation means. It does mean a new West Asian chessboard, an entirely new strategic balance, of deterrence, and not only deterrence, but of the possibility of very successful offensive moves against, the West. Now, the Iranians may not be inclined to do that. They may be inclined instead simply to pressure for the collective West to allow the establishment of a Palestinian state and to end the war, on Gaza. But if the West is not inclined, to do that, then the disposition of Iran may be different. It may become, a disposition to drive the West and especially the U.S. out of the Middle East, which obviously it is highly capable of doing. Now, the U.S. could always retaliate, with nuclear war, of course. But there again, the strategic balance is not in favor of the West because the combined warheads of Russia and China, along with their hypersonic missiles, simply outbalance the current defensive capability of the West. I think the balance of forces is such right now that the United States has to leave the Middle East and fall back on its own oil and gas resources. And for the future security and sake of the United States, it has to accelerate the shift to non-fossil fuel power. And it has to see to it that its allies in Europe do the same. If this doesn't happen now within 2 or 3 years, then this shift in the strategic balance of power is going to become a disastrous thing, for the West. I think this has implications as well, okay, for the turn towards the Pacific and the attempt by the United States and its allies, okay, to counter China. It looks like the powers, okay, of the Eurasian of the landmass are becoming so great that there has to be a comprehensive retreat, okay, on the part of the U.S. Well, I'm going to consider your comments now. No, there aren't too many. Kay says, okay, Joe, I'm out of here. Have a good show. Thank you, Kay. So I guess we don't have many comments. So there's Lisa, who says, hi, guys, putting my son's room back together tonight, but I'm listening. Thank you for coming, Lisa. Always a pleasure to have you here. Andy says, hi, Joe and friends lurking in the background. Andy said, Anthony Bourdain said no other nation made him feel so welcome and were exceptional hosts, okay, other than Iran. And that's really amazing because I think Anthony Bourdain had many CIA connections, if I am not wholly mistaken, okay, about that. Okay, so Andy says, well, perhaps the new chess move on that chessboard will make renewable energy light bulbs come on for the otherwise drunk on gas fumes west. Well, there's considerable oil in the Western Hemisphere as well. Okay, remember, Mexico is fairly rich, okay, in oil. We are still pumping a lot, okay, of fossil fuels and have very damaging resources to use, okay, in this particular respect. Of course, the Venezuelans have massive oil resources, but of course, with a current foreign policy towards Venezuela, there's no way that they will collaborate with us in pulling our chestnuts out of the fire. So the past sins of the United States in terms of foreign policy to Latin America will now come home, okay, to roost. But there are enough fossil fuel resources here, okay, I believe, to supply the Western Hemisphere while we make the shift to renewable resources. And he says, oh, wow, Joe, you said you'd get off of fossil fuels right after I mentioned it. We're vibing. Yep, we are, Andy Candy. Wow. Okay, so that is pretty cool. If you have any other questions, I will entertain them. If not, okay, I will see you tomorrow night. And I'm probably going to be here with another international politics show tomorrow night because I still have the article by Pepe Escobar on the Gaza genocide as explicit policy to cover. And there's also another very long piece to cover. I think that's going to take a program by itself. And that's a piece by Michael Hudson himself, how the U.S. is waging economic war on China. That piece has received very little attention. Okay, it's a transcript actually from a stream Uh, 26th, geopolitical, economy hour. I'm sure that has had many, many views. But there's value, maybe more value, in going over the transcript because then we can comment on the transcript, in detail. But it's a long transcript, and it's going to take a long show to go through it. Okay. So it's also a brilliant show from Radhika Desai, and Michael Hudson. So we're going to go through that, as well this week. Okay, so the next show also is going to be, an international relations show or a geopolitics show. So Dee says, good night. Oh, Dee, I didn't even know you were here. You were very quiet. And he says, but those countries get picked on by the United States. They get picked on by the United States, but some of them are going to be joining BRICS soon. And Brazil, of course, is a member of BRICS, and Brazil is probably too big to pick on. And if Mexico joins BRICS, it will be too big to pick on also. Anyway, all these possibilities remain to be seen. But this success, of Iran is, I think, absolutely staggering. There are also many good shows over this past weekend, where Scott Ritter appeared, and he was assessing, the significance, of the actions by Iran. They were amazing. Even as I speak, though, there may be retaliation by Israel. Those people are crazy. And if Scott's worried about that from his perspective, then I'm worried about it too. And on that note, Scott said Russia hinted for Iran to hold their horses because Russia is still licking its Ukrainian scratches, so to speak. Well, they may be looking for Russia to hold their horses, but the situation in Ukraine is rapidly deteriorating. There are Ukrainian troops that are now surrendering en masse. Some of the most gung-ho of the Ukrainian troops, specifically the Azov people, are refusing orders, in Ukraine now. There's a disintegration of its military going on. Colonel McGregor was saying that he thinks there might be a collapse within the next month and a half or so. That's 45 days. It seems to me, it seems to me from where I sit with the daily surrenders going on, and the daily progress, by Russian troops, and they still haven't launched a major big arrow offensive. Now that all these gains are coming from the attrition, and now they're accelerating, and they're coming fast. It might be a lot less than 6 weeks because the government may collapse actually before them. If people in the armed forces are no longer taking the Zelensky orders or the orders coming through Sersky, who's essentially the representative, of he's the head of the armed forces now. With that happening, the end may be very near for Zelensky, and for the regime, we may start to see, I think we are starting to see political maneuvering, in Ukraine. I don't think anybody can really predict how quickly the collapse of Ukraine is going to come. But I think that Colonel McGregor's estimate at this point is a little overcautious. That collapse is going to come before that. It will certainly come before the U.S. aid, can get there. I wasn't looking at the current news today. I don't know, whether the Ukrainian and Israeli aid packages finally got through the House. If they have, they'll clear the Senate fairly quickly. But that aid cannot get there. The appropriation has been made, but it won't be possible to deliver it to Ukraine in the time remaining before Ukraine actually collapses. And any cash that's delivered to Ukraine at this point may find itself falling into Russian hands. And he says Iran hasn't even shown everything. Yeah, I think that Israel's still, of course, Israel wants to draw the U.S. into that region. At this point, it may be the only way for Israel to survive. And he says, okay, thanks, Joe. I didn't know that Ukraine is giving up the ghost like that. Well, of course, the government in Ukraine isn't giving up the ghost like that. But the soldiers in the field are giving up the ghost, like that. If you look at the coverage provided by the Duran that's going on each day, and you look at the military summary provided by DEMA and other people giving daily progress of the war, that collapse is accelerating. I think it's going to happen very, very soon. Okay, I think I'm going to say goodnight. At this point, I'll be back again tomorrow. With what I think is going to be another amazing show that you can only get here. I think the perspectives you get here are not perspectives you find anywhere else. I think they add greatly to the things that the most advanced of our commentators, Scott Ritter and Pepe Escobar, are saying. Please like, share, and subscribe. Really need, a lot more people to get my takes on these particular subjects. On that note, please do occasionally visit my Patreon site. And please buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/joe.firestone. Thank you very much. And I'll see you tomorrow, but tomorrow I'll be on at 8 and not at 9. I'll try to get on with a shorter stream, sometime earlier, in the day, but I can't really promise that because we still have a very busy daily schedule, Bonnie and I. We have appointments to get to and people to see, and they take, a good part of the day. That's why I haven't been able to stream, actually during the day. I had a scan coming up, actually just yesterday. I have another scan on Thursday. Tomorrow we have a lunch, and I don't know what's going on Friday yet. But anyway, I will be there at 8 o'clock in the evening, tomorrow. And on Thursday, and on Friday, at a minimum. So thank you for coming, and I'll see you then. That's all from me for now.